My therapist helped me realize that I no longer need any therapy. For maybe 1 year, I'd felt quite disoriented with my meditation practice because for all the years previous to that, even though I awakened in stages as we all do, I couldn't quite put my finger on what was missing. And once upon a time, from 19 up to 36, there was always something to gain from it, something to learn, a question to answer, something to seek. And it was like I couldn't get into these places anymore, or into these states, or complete these rituals, or maintain this connection. And I could not understand why I was so disoriented. Why could I not tap into this thing anymore? And yeah, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel lost at all. It just was impossible to complete this thing like it was a practice. And I know that probably sounds bizarre, but it all makes so much sense now. And after some realizations with Richard Young, even though I've always known this, you conceptualize this, but I've always mentioned conceptualizing spiritual experiences is never the same as embodying them. So every time I had an awakening, when I read about these things before awakening, of course I knew that it was more of the self dissolving. But the meditation was rewarding, it was fulfilling, it was challenging, it was painful, it was everything you could imagine, every type of experience in emotion. Breaking through psyche, delving into your shadow work, healing trauma, questioning everything, watching the mind, watching everything about your mind, surrendering. But then, it was like I'd been stripped of my powers, using those words very loosely. And thankfully, my psychologist is incredible at holding the mirror up. And I noticed that after this session that I couldn't get anything more from those either. And it was the same experience that felt was disorienting in the previous year of my meditation practices, no matter how much effort I couldn't put in, but would still try. Just nothing happened. And having conversations with Richard, it's one of my favorite things in the world. I would never choose a reason to not speak to him. I'd always have a question I wanted to ask. There'd always be something else to search, something else to seek, something else to know or to understand or to learn. And clearly it was all from sense of self. But being able to hold the mirror up and see in my session with him that, wow, it all makes so much sense now, that why I was no longer getting anything from my meditation. And that is because there was no self left to take into the meditation. No illusory mind identification to have the experience. So there was nothing to gain, no person to be able to practice. And in my sessions with Richard, there was always something to gain, always something to practice. And then, so I realized, as much as the self dissolved through these stages, this time it was never like that before. This time it was like there was literally nothing more to gain, nowhere else to go. And for me to be able to say, I don't want or I don't need whatever sessions with Richard to focus on myself anymore. There is no bigger sign for me that tells me that thing is really closed now, and probably was way before I was fully ready to understand it. Because like I said, this had been happening in my meditation for 1 year. God knows how long it would have taken if I hadn't been able to speak to him about this. So now there's no one to experience the meditation or the therapy anymore, if the self truly dissolves within the realms of what is truly possible. Obviously, we will always have an ego, but now it's feels truly integrated, like it's a microcosm of oneness and awareness. It's just another thing that exists within everything else, but it's in harmony. It's not identified with. It's more on that another time, though. Yeah, it all just makes so much sense now. And my life, every time, you get a new awakening, there's a new deeper level of peace, appreciation, understanding, intuition, all of those things. Life feels even more synchronized and harmonious, more effortless. There's more clarity. There's more sobering, direct experience. Everything just feels sharper and more vivid every time. But this time it's like, to me, again, the observer disappears in phases. That was a couple of years ago where I last really was embodying an experience where it looked like, or felt like, or came from the mind's eye of the observer watching thoughts and everything else, whatever. That would expand and expand and expand and expand. And every time I did, it felt like I was getting closer and closer to the mirror. So imagine you awaken, you see your reflection. You awaken a bit more, you get closer to it. You get closer and closer, so you see more detail, more everything. And get to learn about you. But then I got this close to the mirror. And imagine when you get that close to the mirror, there's no more reflection. And then it was like something took the mirror away completely. So there was no more Johnny's world and the world. It was just like they merged completely. Yeah, what a trip. And what it feels like is there's no separation. Once upon a time, it felt like there is a skull, there's a brain inside this skull. Whereas now, it feels like there's no separation between my brain and the skull. Like there's not something being contained in here. Call it like loosely a spiritual can opener has just opened this up completely. Not that I'm all wise or exalted or anything in any way. Not that I don't still have lessons to learn. Not that I won't still gain things from Richard, but it's completely different to every other awakening. And yeah, that complete oneness and awareness, just even though it's still through a very limited human perspective. Yeah, just there's that chapter of my self-healing is fulfilled. I've always said awareness and awakening are infinite. Of course they are, as is consciousness, but healing of the self is not. I do believe there is some deeply rooted traumas in all of us that we will never heal, but we will accept. And part of that is accepting that some pain will never disappear. But I'd say for 98% of us, we can probably heal 99% of ourselves. As we lose identification with it, as we release it, as we channel those emotions and let them flow and release them. And yeah, it really irritates people's egos when I say this sometimes, but as I've always said, the self-healing process is not infinite. There's only so much depth of our inner cave that we can shine a light into, and eventually that cave inside out. And every time, let's say the first time you delve into that cave, into your shadows, you're working with a tiny little flashlight. And you're probably quite scared of the unknown, and you can't see much, and it takes so much bandwidth and courage. But then you go out of the cage, and then you're more equipped to prepare for next time. And then, so you prepare with more awareness, which acts like a bigger flashlight for next time you go into the cave. So you can see more of the cave. And it's probably a little bit less frightening because you know last time you went in there that you got out in one piece. And you repeat that thing over and over till eventually you're going in there with this, full beam of light that lights up the entire cave. And then eventually you can have that clarity that, yeah, and this isn't a self-fooling thing. It can be, but you'll know when it no longer is. But eventually the whole cave will just light up and you'll just be able to see that, oh yeah, I know the cave inside out now. What more do I need to know? What more do I need to learn in here? I don't need to come back into this cave anymore. And you can go out into the world. And you know the amazing thing? If you ever do decide to go back in there, eventually you won't even need a flashlight. You won't need a full beam of anything. Because you will be that light. Your presence will be that light that just lights up the entire cave. And that is how, in a nutshell, we not only delve into the psyche, we not only heal the psyche, but we reintegrate our shadow. And that cave, those inner dark depths just become another part of us that we honor, and the light is now shining on it. And it's an incredibly beautiful process. Now, get this for a trip. How does one identify what is missing when the one who is needed to identify what's missing no longer exists and is no longer there? As you continue to meditate, you will silence the parts of the brain that are responsible for the ego, the default network mode. You will recalibrate your entire brain. You'll thicken the prefrontal cortex. Your corpus callosum will connect your right and left hemispheres. The neuroplasticity you will create will literally feel like you are resetting and recalibrating your brain. So the entire thing works in harmony. Yes, we all have thresholds, but you can get it to a place where that oneness that you feel outside of you comes from the complete oneness and connection within your brain. The mind chatter now, getting lost in thought, those things don't really happen anymore. I know that probably sounds like bullshit, but that's why I need to share these things more. In some of my next videos, I'm going to talk about the science of this more and how you can relate it to your practice and get more from it by simply understanding it more. I will see you in the next video.